Good afternoon. Welcome to Jen's Awesome Show. I'm here with Yuka, and we are going to talk about the wonderful story quests that she's writing and probably other things, but all of this takes place in London. So let's start with some introductions. We're going to do a bit of a, since you're a storyteller, we're going to do a bit of a different introduction here. So tell us who you are from the perspective of one of the cats who belongs to London's crazy cat lady.
So I don't know if I can do full storytelling style out loud because my words fail me, but I did bring pictures for what cat I am because I feel
Perfect.
like that's important.
Yes.
Where is it? There we go. Yeah, let's go with that. So I would hope I would be this cat,
Ooh,
but,
that's a pretty cat.
but I live in Florida, so
Yeah,
that's probably more accurate. This would be me.
looks about right. Excellent.
And I definitely came hoping for free food and to be pet because who doesn't love being pet?
Exactly. Nice. So tell me a little bit about the backstory of London. What's the history? What's the culture? What does it feel like in London? I arrive in
So
London and then what?
London's a very welcoming place from the perspective of the story itself. London's been around a lot longer, and if you could do the quest, it's connected in the quest to Genesis. Like that build used to be in London, and I mean it had not in the game, but like in the story, that build used to be in London, and then this big thing came and happened, which you'll find out in the story.
Yes.
And now that was when all of the current dimensions opened up, which would be the other lands. You've got like Gratitude, Genesis, Uplift, Chicken Cow, all of that, so that people
Okay.
are now able to travel between each. But in the process, that build ended up in Genesis.
Okay. That makes some
Yeah.
sense. Good to know. Um, what does London smell like?
London smells like hope and French fries because
Okay.
because
Interesting.
French fries offer you like all these opportunities for like what you make them from, how you make them, and what you put on them. Like you can do anything with French fries.
This is so true. So true. All right. So how long have you been writing stories?
Probably since I was about 13, I want to say.
Okay. What kind of drew you in?
I mean, I've been reading since I don't even remember how long. Like my mom got me into reading, and we just went to the library all the time. And by the time I was in 5th grade, I was reading adult novels. So not like adult romance. I don't mean that. I mean like
Hmm.
full on like full scale fantasy and stuff. And it just kind of, I sponged it up, and eventually you get to a point with reading, if you like reading enough, that you're like, well, I want to read this story, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, and so then you start writing because what else can you do?
Exactly. Okay. So how would you say that writing a story with game mechanics in mind differs from writing for a passive audience?
I think it's both helpful and complicated
That's
because
fair.
you have more of an idea who your audience actually is, which you don't usually.
Yeah, that's a good
But
point.
you also have to try and figure out like what are they going to want to interact with, and if you can't, you just kind of hope.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So are you thinking of making it big on the interaction with the environment or more about the story leading the actual quest movements?
It's a bit of both. Definitely, I want it to like cause people to want to interact with the environment in London and in the uplift in general, because I mean that's what we're all here for anyways, is we want to
Yep,
be interacting in game. If I take it entirely outside of that, nobody's going to want to do anything.
that's
But
fair.
I want the to be able to bring as much of the story into the game as possible and have them connected rather than separate elements.
That makes sense. What are some of the challenges of writing a story for a game?
For story for a game, the challenges are like if I make this too crazy, how can I connect this to the game? Like, what are Minecraft's limits? And until like the last month, I hadn't played vanilla in years. And so I'm like, okay, what are the current limitations? I didn't even know some of these animals and mobs and stuff existed now. And what can I do with this?
That's
And then
fair.
there's also like, what does the uplift have enabled too? Like, you know, what do I
Yeah.
have to work with? You know, are there extras? Are there things that are normally in Minecraft that we don't have? Stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, those are all relative and okay. So why start in Genesis if it's focusing on London eventually?
So we'd had the Genesis build to tie in for a while, and initially it was going to connect directly to London, but we weren't expecting active rewards to come out when they did. So when they came out like a lot earlier than we thought, we were like, okay, well, let's make this happen as soon as possible then, and then we'll like bump like our other plans involving actual plots in London to chapter 1.
Okay.
So this is the
Interesting.
prologue. This is our little prequel here.
Okay, that's cool. Um, okay, so then a couple of related questions. When does chapter 1 start? How long does the prologue run?
Honestly, I don't know. I can't do any firm timelines,
That's fair.
unfortunately, because, you know, life and work and
Yeah,
everything.
totally fair.
Doing my best. There's still a second part of chapter or the prologue. Um, don't know if there's going to be anything extra interactive with that, but there's the second part of the story at least, and I'm going to see what else I can do with it. I would like to see that out by the end of the month.
That would be fun. So if there's a second part and then there's a chapter 1, once those are out, can I still start with the prologue? Or
Oh
is that
yeah,
going to be closed? Okay.
prologue's going to stay there forever. That way anybody can enter in through the prologue quest. That's how you become a member of the community, and everything goes from there.
Okay. Nifty. And so how do we prove that I'm a member of the community? Do I get some sort of an NFT, or do I just get directed to a social site, or how's that work?
Yes, there is an NFT. Nobody shared theirs just yet, but there's an NFT. If you finish the prologue quest, it marks you as a member of the Londomly Londom community.
Cool.
Yes,
Okay.
and it's directly related to the quest of sorts that you get through the prologue.
Okay. And so you said that nobody's finished it yet?
No, we've actually had definitely 4, and we have a few others who are partially through.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, yeah, because that was going to be my next question. How many people have done it so far? So I'm glad I'm not completely late to the party.
Yeah, not completely late.
Not
It's
completely.
been a slow week in game, I think.
Yeah, maybe a bit. How do people know where to start?
So we've posted a few times in the TG and also Twitter. I know some people are getting a little bit confused, but if you watch the prologue, there will be a link underneath the prologue, and then we've linked it in our posts too. The prologue video, the Storyteller's Dream on YouTube.
Yep.
There will be a link below there, and there's links posted in the TG and everything else for the blog, the Uplift blog. And there's an article there with the first part of the prologue. And if you read through that, then you get your clues for how to get to the build.
Okay. I can see that. Interesting. How does the storyteller, and this might be a bit of a spoiler question, how does the storyteller get from Genesis to London?
I'd say that one's fairly simple, just because since I have it written that all of these dimensions are currently open, it's, you know, he can travel already, like anybody can travel to London. And it's in the video somewhat too, how he first got there. Like he knew about London, but this is how he got there.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because I didn't clue in immediately that I would be starting in Genesis. I assumed it would be in London, and so I didn't follow that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that until afterwards. I tried to make it clear once I put it in the writing.
Yeah, well, it turns out that I live with someone who's good at these things, and he figured it out, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So yeah, it's fun. I like surprises. Um, So is the storyteller based on anybody you know? Or is he
Um,
just a completely made up character?
the storyteller originally, like SV came up with the concept. He wanted like an elderly mage wizard type storyteller person. So I don't know if that's based on someone personally for him. When
Okay.
I ran with it, I started thinking like my first thought, and that's probably where I started calling him the storyteller, is there's an old Jim Henson show called The Storyteller. And it's this old dude with
Yeah.
a dog. I don't remember if he was a wizard or not. I didn't really watch it much. But I was thinking of that and Page Master and like just everything with the kindly old wizard, and that's what popped into my head.
Okay.
And to
And
me, they're always very grandfatherly and a bit forgetful and a little bit off.
yeah, that sounds about right. And you mentioned the storyteller in the Jim Henson story had a dog. Does your storyteller have an animal companion?
If he does, that is news to me.
Okay, that's fair. Interesting. Okay. Um, so if we're looking at things from a technical perspective here, is there anything that you can think of, anything you can dream of? Why we're talking wildest dreams, not necessarily possible, that the Uplift could develop or create that would make the mechanics of your story easier for you?
Honestly, the one thing that sticks in my mind is if they could fix book and quill mechanics, because I hate books and quills at this point after doing this.
Yeah, I
Because
believe
you
it.
can't pull stacks out. You have to pull them out individually and make 8 at a time, and then they stack to 16. And I'm trying to fill chests, and people keep running out of books, and I have to go refill them.
That, yeah, if you could shift and click like most things, that would make life
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah,
That's a big
I've
one.
never hated even a digital book before, but I kind of hate these a little bit.
Yeah. Have you run into any issues with getting the copy into the books in terms of spacing or time or editing or anything like that?
No, I did actually have to go in, and unfortunately, if I sign it, I can't edit it. So
Oh,
I
shoot.
have to go. I had to go in and fix one book because I noticed that there was a little bit of confusion on something. If people were making the same mistake, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna rewrite that real quick, change it, which means all the other books had to go. But
Oh, shoot.
yeah, so
Huh.
definitely
Okay.
the book mechanics. Anything else, I think it would just be coolness sake. Like I was looking at that jukebox and thinking like if we could have the little discs but tied to music outside of the game and just play music
Yes.
that we choose, that would be amazing. And I certainly hope that's something that they're thinking about doing at some point. I feel like the mechanic's already there if it's playing music that they put into the game.
I love that idea. Yeah, I'd have to think it would work similar to a texture pack, right? Like you just have something that follows the same code but is different.
Yeah, like adding new items or something.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, because that would be a ton of fun and that would change a lot of things too.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
mean, if we could have like random special effects events, that would be great. But I feel like that's super resource heavy right there. Not to mention trying to figure it out.
Yeah, the biggest special effect that I could figure out was how to get fireworks to happen every time somebody picks up a piece of birthday cake. And that took more brain power than I had. I ended up recruiting my husband to help with the redstone. So it's beyond
I
that.
would not be able to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot that the game can do if you know the redstone.
Yeah, I've been surprised. That stuff's been crazy. SV did all the redstone. I was like, I didn't even know you could do this. You go for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So so far, which of the Londomly Londom community platforms seems to just organically have more people active?
Um, I mean, we get a decent amount of like likes and retweets on Twitter, but I wouldn't say anybody's like directly engaging. Um, but Discord, we've got a decent amount of activity there, just from like older players who have been helping with like the story that's upcoming.
Okay. Well, that's probably the place to go then. Keep that in mind. And it's just the Londomly Londom on Discord?
That is something like there's you'll be able to get the invite from the quest as well,
Perfect. So I
and
definitely
all
have
part
to
of
include that
onboarding
then.
your membership.
Awesome. Definitely have to do that. And couple of storyteller questions, because I'm always very fascinated by this. When you look at the world, do you see it through the perspective of everything is part of a story, or do you see things differently than that?
Are you talking about the Uplift world or the real world?
Let's go with either or both.
I think the Uplift, I tend to think more in, it's not necessarily a story, but I just get like ideas for things that I want to create
Yep.
and go from there. But everything else, like, I'm not really that great at living in reality. So most of the time I'm not thinking about reality other than maybe bills.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing really feels as real as I think everybody else sees it.
I can understand that. It's story being in a story is an interesting place to be, and creating that. So, do you write the story, or does the story tell itself through you?
I think it's a bit of both. It's just a matter of like when's which one going to happen. Like
Okay.
literally
Yep.
for this one, I had a concept, I had stuff written, and 48 hours before launch, as I was writing it, it changed. And I had to fix everything based on that.
That's got to be slightly stressful.
Slightly, but it's always really nice at the same time. It's like, and I go with it every time it happens because I mean, it just feels like, well, this is how it was meant to be. So like, why would I go with anything else, even though it's being really irritating right now?
Yeah, I can understand that feeling too. Okay. Um, when you're writing, do you have a tendency to like start with an idea and then build around that, or do you tend to come up with a universe, a cosmology, a culture, a sense of place, and then build from there? Or do you have like a character and then that character sort of goes along and the story creates itself, or how does that all work, or is it a bit of all of that?
It's kind of a hodgepodge of something related to the first one. For
Okay.
anyone who's familiar with the term, I'm a pantser, which means I
Okay.
kind of fly by the seat of my pants. It's
Mm-hmm.
I get an idea for a scene and I write that scene, and that might lead to another scene, but I might write a bunch of random scenes out of order and then piece them together later, or throw some out, or completely change them.
Okay.
Definitely with this has been a different kind of writing because I'm not used to writing on a timeline or writing with other people's characters. Like I've done a little bit of it because I've like led games before, but taking people's characters and deciding, okay, like, well, this is how they're like in here without them writing it directly and what they're doing, that part is like, I suddenly have to write around that character. Okay, what is this character doing? And that happened with several of them as I was writing them in. Like I had like a base idea and then it went with something else. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is how this person is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. And with something like that, you mentioned that you've led games before. So what's different between what you're doing now and leading a game?
When I was leading games before, it was something like basically freeform D&D online. It was like all of us writing a story together. Like I controlled the environment and the NPCs and everything and the base storyline, and other people, like it was usually like a couple of friends, would have their characters and they would interact with the storyline. So they'd actively be writing their parts.
Okay.
So I'd have more clear input on what their characters would do.
That makes sense. Okay. Um, would you say that there are challenges for writing a story when you have a group of important characters as opposed to something with one or two characters that are clearly leading the story?
Absolutely. Like I mean, I've definitely done like groups of character, but there's almost always like one or two. It's like that stand out there. And with this, these are not just characters, like they stand for actual people. So I definitely feel the pressure of like, I want to make sure everyone who has land and is active in London is eventually in the story, but I want to make sure they're represented like well and like in a way that makes them happy and enough. Like definitely people who are more interactive are going to have more of a role, but I don't want to
Yep.
make anybody feel left out either.
So does that That is an interesting challenge. Does that end up feeling more like a whole bunch of separate stories that take place in the same universe, or can it still be kind of woven as one?
I feel like it's going to be a mixture. Like,
Okay.
definitely there's going to be like sections off here and there, maybe groupings of characters, but it all falls under the same umbrella.
Interesting. Okay. Um, with the story so far, as I've heard it, there seem to be kind of two voices. There's a narrator, and then there's the storyteller. Is there ever a point where we discover that they're the same person?
Absolutely. It's revealed in the first part of the prologue. It's just he's writing as both himself and himself as a storyteller, so he switches back and forth, which is probably more my fault than anything, but he's also absent-minded, so it works.
That definitely does. That's fun. That adds a layer of something. So how does, as the storyteller, how does he end up seeing all of these things if he is not necessarily directly involved, but he's telling the story? Is the story a real thing that's happening, or is it a vision in his head, or is it both and he's somehow just really powerful that way?
It's both. That's in there too. He is an actual storyteller, and before this all started, he sat down one night, half like not really awake, just basically writing in his sleep, and he wrote out the entire story of London. But by the time he woke up, the pages were gone, and he doesn't remember doing it. So this is gradually discovering the story that he's already seen in the future, including the choices that people have in the future and will make.
Okay. Huh. I like that. Um, is there anything that you can tell people who are working on the quest that might make it slightly easier for them without giving away spoilers?
The books are absolutely in a specific order, and today, by the end of the day, I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit them in with like 1 of 16, etc., so that people know when they're on the right book.
Okay, that's good to know. And yeah, and sorry, how many books are there?
I believe it's 16.
Okay.
I'd have to check again to be absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure it's 16.
Okay, because that's good to know too, because that's always something. Did I find all of them? I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So, do you think that there will ever be a time when people are going to sell the books?
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out the logistics, especially if I have to make these book and quills one at a time in survival, of handing them out, because that's always been the plan. But after seeing, like, some people will grief and take more books, and some people will accidentally take more books.
Yeah.
And just, I'm wondering if it might be better to display them than give them out and connect it elsewhere so that they can, like, have it as potentially like an NFT or something.
That was going to be the next question. What about books as NFTs? Because
that's definitely been discussed, because, like, I mean, everything else is slowly being taken into the NFT universe. Like, why wouldn't we transform literature as it is, especially as people not wanting to read as much? If you attach it to a game and then make it collectible, why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then have people trading to get, that one part that they're missing. And yeah, I could see that being very fun. Okay. Do you think it would be a written book or an audio book, or any idea what that might look like, or both?
I hadn't even considered audiobook. That could be interesting, but I feel like that would definitely take a lot more doing.
It would, yeah. There'd be a lot more tech on that, because they'd need somebody to read it.
Mm.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, I think that's all of my questions. What would you like to add?
I'm not really sure.
Well, that's okay. I'm looking forward to walking through the quest and reading all the things and seeing what I can find out.
Absolutely. I mean, that's been my favorite part so far. Like, I like seeing people's reactions. I like that most of the time we know if they've completed it because they say something. Yeah. I want that reaction.
Yeah.
I guess that's another difference here, is that normally somebody can read your book and you're never even going to know that they read it, let alone see what their reaction is.
That's very true. How is that different? How does that feel?
It's a little nerve-wracking because I know that, just with the way things go, eventually there's going to be a negative reaction that I'm going to have to see.
Oh yeah,
But I haven't
mostly.
had to, and the positive reactions are like really helpful in terms of like keeping up excitement and like the morale to keep going.
Yeah. Huh. There's somebody in the comments here saying that you
Oh,
could use lecterns in survival for placing books.
yeah, I was considering that because like I think we found out that they can't take them off. It's just we had initially thought, it'd be cool to give it to them as an actual item, but it might logistically be very difficult.
Yeah, with survival, that would be a lot of cows.
Yeah. And then I think honestly, I'd rather put more energy toward builds and quests than gathering cow leather and making books.
Yeah, you'd almost need an army of people to help with that, and that could get intense.
Yeah, I figured if the books do stay, then probably it's going to be a donation thing where people do get like there are merits in the community for ranks and such, which get you perks, and they could get a certain amount of merits for turning in books and quills or the materials for such, like if that stays around.
Yeah, that would be a use case for hoppers too. Drop a book in the hopper, get a book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's in the story and seeing how that all plays out.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having me.